All right, strap yourselves in because we are diving deep into the second term of President Trump. And wow, things are already pretty wild.
It's definitely not your typical situation.
Well, right.
A second term, but not consecutive.
And he is not exactly easing back into things, is he?
Not at all.
We're looking at news articles from both Fox News and the Associated Press, and they are covering just the first 2 days.
Just 2 days.
2 days of Trump being back in the White House.
It's fascinating, really, to see how he's approaching this term. It's almost like he wants to, redefine what presidential power looks like, when it's actually being used.
Yeah, it really does feel like someone hit that fast forward button on the usual transition of power.
Yeah.
We've got executive orders, pardons, staff, shakeups, and it's all happening so fast.
Oh, yeah, at a dizzying pace.
And the reactions are, well, depends on who you ask, but
Right.
surprised seems to be like the common thread,
Yeah.
along with a healthy dose of outraged. So what we're going to do in this deep dive is really try to sift through this mountain of activity and try to figure out what it all means.
Okay.
What does this tell us about Trump's strategy this time around?
Yeah.
What are some of the conflicts that are brewing, and what can you, the listener, expect in the coming months?
Well, one of the most striking things is how he is using this shock and awe tactic.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what really jumped out to me, too. It seems like both Fox News and AP are using that term to describe the sheer volume and speed of what he's doing.
Exactly. It's like he's trying to overwhelm, any opposition before they can even figure out what's happening.
Like he's trying to get them before they even get their bearings.
Exactly.
It is a bold strategy for sure, but do you think it's sustainable in the long run?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, governing effectively usually involves, building consensus
Sure.
and navigating legal challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And we're already seeing some pushback and lawsuits. And like we said, it's only day 2.
It is a really important point to make. This kind of overwhelming approach might work initially, like in the short term, but it could backfire.
Right.
You have to wonder, is he sacrificing long-term stability for those short-term gains?
Interesting. Okay, let's talk about something that really caught my eye. And I have to admit, I'm still a little baffled by it.
Okay.
The Panama Canal situation.
Yes.
Did you see this? During his inaugural address,
I did.
Trump just casually mentions that the U.S. is going to be taking back the Panama Canal.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, where did that even come from?
Yeah.
Fox News has a piece called Russia Sounds Off on Trump's Threat to Retake the Panama Canal.
Right.
And the whole thing just feels surreal.
Surreal.
To understand this, I mean, I guess we need to remember the history of the canal.
Yeah. So the U.S. did build it, but the 1977 treaties transferred control to Panama by the year 2000.
Right.
And these treaties aren't just between the U.S. and Panama. They have global implications for trade and for international law.
Right.
So regardless of what Trump actually intends to do with this statement, it sends a pretty strong message to the world.
What kind of message?
One that says that the U.S. is willing to challenge, those established norms.
Yeah.
And maybe even use force to get what it wants.
Oh, wow. Okay. And the reactions?
Oh.
I mean, Panama's president pretty quickly emphasized their total sovereignty and ownership of the canal.
Right.
Russia also called on Trump to, respect international agreements.
Of course.
It seems like this taking back rhetoric isn't exactly winning him any friends on the global stage.
No, it doesn't seem like it.
It's not just a symbolic gesture, is it? I mean,
Yeah.
the Panama Canal is like this crucial artery for global trade.
Exactly.
Any disruption to its operation would have huge economic consequences, not just for the U.S. and Panama, but for the whole world.
The entire world.
This statement creates uncertainty and raises concerns about how he's going to approach foreign policy.
Yeah, a lot of concerns about that.
All right, let's move on to something else that has been generating a lot of headlines. The sheer number of pardons granted to people that were involved in the January 6th Capitol riot.
Yes, we all knew it was coming to some extent.
We knew it was coming, but the scale of it is still pretty shocking.
Yeah, it is.
The Associated Press has a piece detailing how over 1,500 people have already been pardoned or had their sentences commuted.
Or had their cases dismissed.
Yeah. And get this includes people who pleaded guilty to assaulting police officers.
Yes, and the potential ramifications of this are huge.
I can imagine.
Pardoning people convicted of violent crimes, especially against law enforcement,
Yeah.
raises serious concerns about, undermining the rule of law.
Yeah, I can see that.
It sends a dangerous message about accountability, especially when it comes to political violence.
Definitely. And law enforcement groups are understandably outraged.
Oh, yeah.
They're calling the pardons deeply discouraging
Yeah.
And they're expressing concerns about the long-term consequences of this.
Right.
Does this set a precedent where political violence is just seen as acceptable?
Or even rewarded.
Or even rewarded? This
Yeah.
is something I think we all need to consider very carefully.
I agree. It also ties into this broader issue of growing political polarization
Yeah.
and this erosion of trust in democratic institutions.
Mm-hmm.
When pardons are viewed as partisan tools, it further undermines faith in the justice system.
Yeah.
And the idea of equal justice under the law, it makes people question the fairness and impartiality of the whole system.
Right. Makes you wonder if everyone is playing by the same rules.
Exactly.
And it definitely is a lot to process. Speaking of controversial decisions,
Yeah.
let's talk about Trump's approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, or DEI for short.
DEI.
Both Fox News and AP have been covering this pretty extensively.
Yeah, they have.
Almost immediately, he signed an executive order to put all federal DEI staff on leave,
On leave.
with the intention of eventually laying them off.
Wow.
He's also targeting DEI programs in federal contracting and grant recipients.
So this is a major policy shift, and it has the potential to create some significant ripple effects. You know, DEI programs are often debated, but their aim is to try and, address these systemic inequalities
Right.
and promote representation for marginalized groups in various sectors.
Okay.
The concern with dismantling these programs is that it could, stall or even reverse progress towards a more equitable society.
Yeah, that's a good point. The justification being used is that these programs are discriminatory and that we need to restore this, merit-based hiring.
Right.
Now, I'm all for a level playing field.
Sure.
But is this really about fairness, or is there something else going on here?
Well, it's important to acknowledge that there are often conflicting views on the effectiveness and the fairness of these DEI programs.
Right.
Some people argue they're necessary to address historical injustices and level the playing field,
Yeah.
while others see them as a form of reverse discrimination.
Oh.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Right.
And it's likely to be a point of contention throughout Trump's second term.
For sure. This deep dive is already proving to be quite the roller coaster. We've got executive orders flying left and right,
Yeah.
pardons that have people scratching their heads,
Yeah.
and now a complete overhaul of federal programs. It's clear that Trump isn't afraid to shake things up, but is this boldness what we need, or is it veering into recklessness? I guess we'll have to keep digging to find out.
Yeah.
What are your initial thoughts? What's jumping out at you as we unpack these first few days?
Well, it's definitely keeping us on our toes.
Yeah.
One thing I find particularly interesting and maybe a bit ironic is his stance on cryptocurrency.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a plot twist you'd see in a movie.
Right.
On one hand, he's talking about ushering in this crypto-friendly era,
Right.
promising less regulation, and even hinting at creating a U.S. Bitcoin reserve.
A Bitcoin reserve.
But then out of nowhere, he launches his own meme coin.
I know.
It's kind of wild.
The cryptocurrency world is watching all of this unfold with a mix of excitement and apprehension.
Understandably.
The potential for growth and innovation in the sector is undeniable.
But the lack of clear regulations and the emergence of these volatile assets like meme coins
Right.
create unique challenges.
And let's be honest, the whole meme coin thing has raised more than a few eyebrows.
Yeah.
Even some of Trump's supporters in the crypto community are questioning the timing and the optics of it all.
Yeah, you can understand why they might be skeptical.
Right.
I mean, meme coins by their very nature are often driven by hype and speculation rather than any underlying value or utility.
Okay.
And it creates this perception of instability,
Uh-huh.
which is the opposite of what you want when you're trying to establish legitimacy for a market.
Exactly. It's hard to reconcile being a champion of crypto innovation while simultaneously profiting from a market that even experts admit is incredibly risky.
Yeah, it begs the question,
What's that?
can Trump effectively navigate this seemingly contradictory position?
Yeah.
Can he be both a supporter of the crypto industry and a player in a potentially volatile market without jeopardizing the stability he's trying to promote?
Right. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. Okay, let's shift gears to something that happened at the National Prayer Service that really resonated with me.
Okay.
The Associated Press published a piece describing this incredibly powerful moment where Reverend Bo directly addressed Trump,
Yes.
urging him to show mercy to those who are living in fear.
Right.
She specifically mentioned LGBTQ individuals, immigrant workers, and families who are afraid of being separated.
It was a truly remarkable moment, especially given the setting and the audience.
I thought so too.
Her plea really highlighted the anxieties and fears felt by these communities under a Trump presidency. There's a line in the article where she says, "In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy."
Uh-huh.
And those words carry so much weight, especially in contrast to the political rhetoric we often hear.
Yeah, and Trump's reaction. According to the AP article, he essentially dismissed the entire service as not too exciting.
Really?
And said that he didn't think it was good.
That dismissive reaction really speaks volumes.
It does.
It seems to highlight a disconnect between Trump's rhetoric of unity and the lived experiences of those who feel marginalized or threatened by his policies.
Yeah, the contrast is definitely stark. And it brings us back to the core question we're exploring in this deep dive.
Yeah.
What does all of this mean?
Yeah.
What does it tell us about what we can expect from Trump in this second term? So we have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Trump's first 100 days.
We really have.
We have seen bold moves, controversial decisions, and a range of reactions both here in the U.S. and internationally.
Definitely.
But now we need to take a step back and ask, what does it all mean? What are Trump's priorities for this term?
Right.
And what might this whirlwind start tell us about what we can expect from him going forward?
Well, it's fascinating because while the actions themselves have been so dramatic, the underlying goals still feel a bit like a puzzle that we are trying to piece together.
Yeah.
There's a clear emphasis on asserting American dominance, both in terms of the economy and on the global stage.
Right.
But the specifics of how he plans to achieve that remain a bit unclear.
Yeah, it's almost like he's setting up the chessboard,
Yeah.
making these big attention-grabbing moves, but he hasn't quite revealed his overall strategy yet.
I agree.
Take the economy, for example. He's touting this huge AI infrastructure project,
Right.
billions of dollars,
Billion.
as a sign of American innovation and a path back to economic prosperity.
Yes, but there's this tension there, isn't there?
Yeah, see that.
On one hand, you have this embrace of cutting-edge technology and a real push for American leadership in artificial intelligence.
Okay.
But on the other hand, you have policies like rolling back DEI programs, which some would argue could actually hinder the very diversity of talent and thought needed to drive real innovation.
So it's like he's trying to play both sides,
A little bit, yeah.
appealing to different groups with agendas that might ultimately be at odds with each other.
Yeah, and we can't ignore the impact of the pardons. It's pretty clear those were aimed directly at solidifying his base, reinforcing the loyalty of those who feel he's been wronged or unfairly targeted.
The pardons are a really interesting example of how Trump is willing to prioritize political loyalty
Yeah.
over traditional ideas of justice and accountability. And while they are legally within his power,
Yes.
they do raise concerns about the potential for abuse of power and the erosion of those democratic norms that a lot of people hold dear.
A lot of people are concerned about that.
It definitely sets a precedent that has a lot of people worried.
And
What about the global stage? We've already seen how his rhetoric on the Panama Canal has created tension.
right.
Is he going to continue down this America First path when it comes to foreign policy, even if it means alienating allies and escalating tensions with rivals like China and Russia?
It's definitely a possibility. His approach to foreign policy so far seems to be this mix of transactional deal-making
Yeah.
and a focus on projecting American strength, even if it means acting unilaterally.
Yep.
And that approach could lead to a more unpredictable and potentially volatile global landscape.
So what does all of this mean for you, our listener?
Well, I think it's safe to say that Trump's second term is shaping up to be anything but predictable.
I think that's a safe bet.
We can probably expect more bold and likely controversial actions,
Probably.
and a persistent effort to reshape the political landscape, both here at home and abroad.
It seems likely.
The key takeaway here is to stay informed. Think critically about the information that's coming at you from all sides,
Yes.
and be prepared for the unexpected.
always be prepared.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. How do you think Trump's second term will impact your life? What are you most hopeful about, and what are your biggest concerns? These are questions worth reflecting on as we all try to navigate this new chapter together.